Carried. Item number 15, if I can ask Warwick, thank you very much for the team that's just leaving, and ask Warwick McNaughton to come to the table. This relates to standard paper dealing with the impending local government elections and the decision-making authority over the period both from the last governing body meeting to election day, and from election day to the period in which the new council is sworn in. So, Warwick, would you like to speak to the paper?
That's a pretty good summary. The only other items in the paper are just to bring to your attention. Most of other bodies that people are appointed to, the term of office ends at the time you go out of office, and new people are then appointed. But we've drawn to your attention the advisory panels. Their terms of office come to an end in September, and the Monga Authority members whose terms of office continue for 60 days.
Thank you. I'll move. Have I got a seconder, please? Okay. Oh, no, well, we're going to move it. I'm not putting it to a vote. I just want to move the recommendation, seconded by Councillor Cooper, and we come to questions. Councillor Walker.
I just want to raise a concern, Warwick, because obviously B here is delegating to any two of the mayor, the deputy mayor, and the chairperson the power to make on behalf of the governing body urgent decisions that may be needed, and quite obviously those decisions could be all sorts of things. Is there any trigger point where it could be a decision of some magnitude and of concern to the councillors generally? Because I just make the observation that the councillors are still councillors.
I'm sure that...
I mean, heaven forbid, I mean, I'm sure the mayor and the deputy mayor wouldn't pull a Swiftie on something.
It'd be a really unfortunate time for them to do so, because it's right in the middle of the election campaign. I think you can rest assured, and I think this is simply a standard procedure, but if there was an urgent decision, and your question is a valid question, and it required the calling together of the council, there is no, let me double check with Marguerite, there is no reason why in a particularly profound decision that we can't call a meeting of the governing body between the 26th of September and the 12th of October.
I'm sure
And you'd expect us to do that.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Have I answered your question?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Your worship.
Any further questions? Or Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. Just on the civil defence, if you'd just like to explain to those on the Civil Defence Committee.
Yes, it's important that we have a Civil Defence Emergency Management Group which continues through, and the legislation which sets that up specifically states that that committee is not discharged at the time the other committees are discharged.
Thank you. Are there any comments? If there are no comments, I'll put the recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. The next item, item 16, is my report on the attendance at the Brisbane Asia Pacific City Summit just a couple of weeks ago. It's pretty self-evident. I've tried to keep it brief to what the issues were and what I did there, and I've enclosed a copy of the formal speech that I gave. It didn't exactly follow my notes, but it was pretty close to my notes. And just to note that it was Brisbane is our sister city. This is a meeting that's held every 2 years, and when it's held in Brisbane, it's actually relatively cheap. In fact, the entire cost of this trip was $830, which was largely the airfare and one taxi fare. So I found it worthwhile. Maybe I'll just highlight one point. When we had the Merrill Forum, we broke into smaller groups, and we had probably 8 mayors at the table that I was at, including myself and the Mayor of Brisbane. And Brisbane and Auckland are very similar in the challenges we face. And our big challenges is that we're both very rapidly growing cities. So we were talking liberally about what the challenges of needing to keep infrastructure investment up with growth was, and the challenges of growth. And there were 3 mayors there, one from Daejeon in Korea, one from Kobe in Japan, and one from West Vancouver in Canada. And they said, just before you finish, listen to our problems. Our problems are that our cities are in decline. Our young people are leaving, the jobs are leaving, and we have massive problems in dealing with that situation and no easy answers. And I came away a little bit chastened, thinking that actually the problems of growth are much better problems to have than the problems of decline. But I just thought I'd add that in. That had a lasting impact on me. But good to see some of the things that Brisbane was doing, particularly with their new Cross River Rail project and their Brisbane Metro project. Big dollar sums, and really the need to do that to stop impending gridlock in the city. But I'm open to any questions. If anybody's got any questions, it's pretty straightforward, I think. May not require any further discussion. Deputy Mayor.
Can't let you off that easily. Brisbane and Auckland are very similar in profile, with the exception perhaps of capital funding. And could you give us a bit more information, please, around with the substantive amount of capital works that is going on in Brisbane, their flows of capital funds beyond that of their local ratepayer?
Yeah, that's a fair question. Brisbane and Auckland, Brisbane's a bit bigger than us, they're over the 2 million mark now, but a unitary city, the only other unitary city in Australasia. And when I looked at the big projects, the first question I asked was your question, well, where does the funding come from? The Cross River Rail project, for example, is nearly $5.5 billion, largely funded by state government, and state government largely funded by devolution of funds from federal government, including GST. And I think this backs up the strength of our argument around this table. I don't think there's anyone that disagrees that when you create a super city like we are, and you give us the challenges that we have, we should not have to go every time cap in hand to ask central government for funding. There needs to be mechanisms for the devolution of funding. And on the Brisbane Metro, the central government paid for a third of that. Well, maybe that's comparable to, say, what we're doing on City Rail Link. But it does highlight the need for a city of our size to have an independent source of revenue more than simply reliance on property taxes, which are very sensitive and which are normally paid in lump sum and can be problematic in terms of people's ability to pay. Any further questions? Great, thank you. I'll move that the report be received. Have a seconder for that?
Happy to second.
Councillor Walker, happy to have you second. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. Yeah, very, very modest. And that's the way we should be on areas of sensitive expenditure. The last item before we get to extraordinary business is a summary of governing body information memoranda and briefings. That's again just a noting paper. I'll move accordingly. Do I have a seconder for that? Seconded. It's a challenge between the two. Councillor Efeso Collins. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. The last item on the agenda is the issue of consideration under extraordinary business of the situation on the ground in Ihumātao, and this was raised with me by Councillor Casey, so I'll ask for Councillor Casey to lead off the discussion. Councillor Casey.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, this is everyone in this room is aware of the current situation at Ihumātao and the involvement of police, and there have already been arrests. It's on our watch. We're the governors of Auckland, so we have a duty of care to the people there. And I think my call in this extraordinary item, and we called for it before, I mean, we have correspondence with the Mayor from June, but things are changing by the day there. And because the government said no to the Mayor back in June, might not mean they'll say no to a future meeting now if we are to avert a situation that could escalate as Bastion Point did. And so my extraordinary item and the resolution that I'd like to put before the Mayor is that he convene a meeting of all parties with an interest in the lands at Ihumātao here at the Town Hall, and that has the backing unanimously of this governing body. I think that is all we can do, but we have to do something So to say, well, we tried before and so said no, or so had, I think we need to say the situation is grave and it's on our watch.
Thank you, Councillor. I think I should probably reply after others have had the chance to have a say, so I'm open to any further contributions. Councillor Lee.
Yes, I share the concerns of Councillor Casey, and obviously this is not a new matter and certainly precedes the present council and indeed the present government. And that's interesting in itself because it is not going away, as some people might hope. It has become a festering sore between the local community and the developer. It has caused major problems within the local marae to the stage now, and with the law, to the stage that people are being arrested. So strongly do they feel about this. In many respects, it reminds me of the Bastion Point protest that dragged on and had an unhappy ending at that particular time anyway. And I think that the situation calls for governance leadership from the Super City, from the Auckland Council and from the new government. The root of the matter lies in special government legislation, creating special housing areas, and the council actively supported those objectives. I think it's time now to have another look at this particular problem. The council needs to be the healing agency here, to work with the local board and the government to resolve it. I don't like, coming from a background where of a council that bought a lot of land, I don't like to talk in public about land acquisitions, but it is something that needs to be considered, that ideally the government needs to sit down with Fletchers and say, this is causing a lot of problems. The government itself or its predecessor have been involved in these decisions, as have the council. It's not worked out that well. We need your help to resolve it. And without getting into details of how the matter could be resolved, the government is the government with significant power, and Fletchers, of all people, would appreciate how much power the government has and how it needs government and council goodwill to do business in this country. Despite its domestic sounding name, familiar name, it is a foreign-owned entity and it needs the goodwill of the Auckland Council and the New Zealand government to do business, and it's in their interests to sit down with the Mayor and ideally the Prime Minister or designated minister to get this thing sorted, to clear up and heal this weeping sore which has been allowed to fester for way too long. Mr Mayor, I have written a letter to you from the Heritage Advisory Panel in response to submissions from Sol, and I look forward to a response at some stage so that I can turn around to the Sol people and say, here is an answer. At this stage I haven't got one. So it is a time, it's not easy, but it is a time for leadership, and I urge the exercise of leadership to solve this case. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a clarification, Councillor Lee, I've got the reply that I sent you on the 15th of May 2019 in your capacity as Chair of the Heritage Advisory Panel. So I think you received that. It was a very, very full reply. You wrote to me, I think, a couple of days before that, and I sent a very full reply to you, but I can, it's now 3 months old, but I can I can resubmit that to you and to all other councillors.
I think this was a more recent one, but anyway,
I
I'll better
haven't seen
check on
anything
that.
since
Thank
then. Okay, thank you. Further comment. Councillor Darby. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I called you out of order, Councillor. My apologies. Councillor Collins, you had indicated.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I just wanted to thank you, Mr. Mayor, for responding to the numerous emails that I've sent to you over time, and last night to the number of texts. We were having a really good text conversation. I really appreciate the fact that you had come back to me and you even sought advice to pass on to me. So I just wanted to acknowledge what you've been able to do. Look, I wanted to support this move because I think this is almost like a last-ditch attempt to bring some kind of peaceful resolution to the situation at Ihu Mātau. The report that the Māori Affairs Committee had in relation to Protect Ihu Mātau concluded that we also acknowledge the situation at SHA 62 is complex. There are competing rights and interests to the land, and we understand that the petitioners have an interest in preserving this historically significant site. We urge all stakeholders to work constructively together, and we therefore recommend that the House take careful note of the petitioners' concerns. And what we're trying to do here is build a case as to why a facilitated discussion with all the parties is so needed. There's been comment in the media around a generational divide, around how, and this has been acknowledged by both Te Warena in his public comments and Pania Newton in her public comments. As the liaison for the youth panel, I get quite excited. It's a little bit naughty perhaps, but I get excited that our young people in particular are standing up. They believe that there's a wrong going on here, and they're standing up, taking exception to what's happening at Ihu Mātau. And I think we should get behind our young people and ensure that they feel like their voice is being heard too. Now, I'm not denying that there's conflict here, but this is why a facilitated conversation is going to help make a difference. I also wanted to relay the concerns that Sharon Hawke commented with on Radio New Zealand this morning when she said she can see the similarities between what is happening at Ihu Mātau and what she observed with Bastion Point. I've been out there for the last couple of nights. I was glad they had a little bonfire going because it was freezing through the night, and I don't know how they're doing, those people who are staying there at night. And I want to commend those, and I know that the likes of Jackie are here today, who have been staying there overnight and guarding, protecting the land. There's a lot of police out there, Mr. Mayor. There's heaps. And I kind of wonder why they closed all the police stations locally, because that's where they all are now. They've created a massive police station at Ihu Mātau. And it feels like our overstretched police force are being used as almost a private security firm for a group of foreign investors that Councillor Lee has referred to. This does not have a place in my ward. We do not need this number of police hanging out in my ward. They are no danger to anybody. This is completely over the top on the part of the police. I went out with my wife and my daughter yesterday in the afternoon. We thought we wanted to be seen in daylight because the last couple of times I've been there, it's been in the night, and I didn't want the good folk out there to think I was a bit of a Thomas and a disciple coming in the night. They had an area for the children where they could draw pictures, and so Kapiriela went over because she saw the paintbrushes and the A3 pieces of paper, and she turned to Fia, her mum. She said, "Mum, what should I draw?" And Fia said to Kapiriela, "Draw what's on your heart from what you've seen." We parked about 300 metres away and walked, and the first thing my daughter asked me was, "Why is the police helicopter above us?" I didn't have an answer for her. I said, "But in South Auckland, this happens all the time, and the good folk of Remuera complain when the helicopter's on its way over." We walked down, we joined the protectors of the land. And this time that allowed us to walk onto the fields as well. So Kapiriela starts drawing her picture, and I'm busy taking photos with the folk like Glenn McCutcheon, who's an elderly woman who's sitting there just in front of the police line. Police whom I know, who go to church with me, looking like deep down what they're really saying is, why the heck are we here? My daughter drew this massive heart with on her A3 piece of paper with beams or rays of love extending outwards from her big heart. And over the top of the heart, with my dad's approval from heaven, I'm sure, she drew a big cross. I kind of paused for a minute wondering, why would she have drawn that? Well, maybe because for our family and the faith that we choose to own, that I want to tell you a little bit about, for us, that cross is the greatest symbol of forgiveness, of reconciliation, and of hope. And it's my position today that perhaps that's what my daughter was trying to espouse here and share with what she was drawing. So our request today is that we take a decent, adequate, and further step in the spirit of hope, in the spirit of forgiveness, and in the spirit of reconciliation, so that we can have this discussion. Let's not stop talking. This land was confiscated over 100 years ago, and perhaps the greatest move we can make is to heal the past, is to perhaps take this very bold step to wipe the tears of our ancestors, whose land was confiscated over 100 years ago. The fool said, "Madman," those of you who like a bit of Shakespeare, "thou errest. I say there is no darkness but ignorance, in which thou art more puzzled than the Egyptians in their fog." Oh, if only Malvolio knew what it was to be in the dark. And that's why he left the story so upset. Sir, herein lies our opportunity to get out of the dark, to attack this ignorance full on, so that the letters that Malvolio thought were written to him would in fact be known to all of us, so that all the agendas could come out, because we all know that there are stories behind a whole lot of raft of things here that we're not sure of. We need a lot more honesty here. Perhaps most poignantly, this is our chance to work constructively with all the parties, wipe away those ancestral tears, and really make a difference in protecting that beautiful land of Ihumātao. Kia ora.
Thank you very much, Councillor, for those heartfelt words. Councillor Darby.
Thank you. Just on clarification, I'm not speaking to this at the moment. For Councillor Casey, where is the mandated iwi in those words, Te Kaora o Maki? Which party are they?
One of the iwi groups.
It's more complicated than that.
That's the complication.
I'm just, look, has this motion had any input from our Office of Treaty Settlements? Look, I'm very mindful of getting the words right, otherwise we can have words that really upset a party, and I'm just concerned that the words at the moment do not identify the mandated mana whenua of somehow. I think it's respectful to have that.
I think that's the point, and I picked up the comment from Councillor Casey that she's happy to have that included. So I think the mana whenua parties and I think if you look at what the discussion will be between, if it were to happen, it would be between government, maybe with council there, mana whenua and the Soul group. Those are the groups that we're talking about. And the I'm sorry, you're welcome to be here, but you're not welcome to interrupt the proceedings of this meeting. And I think it's important that all of the mana whenua, because there's disagreement even amongst the mana whenua as to who has the right to speak, that they all be there. So I think, Councillor Casey, if you can just amend your resolution accordingly, we can come back and discuss that point.
Also, just for the
Yep.
person who
Councillor
interjected,
Casey.
Auckland Council means the governing body of Auckland Council and the local board. And we might need to make that specific too, given that interjection.
Yep. I've no problem with the local board being invited. Right, Councillor Newman.
Thank you, Your Worship. With respect to Ihumātao, I wasn't sitting around this table when the matter was first debated with respect to the special housing area proposal. My views around the Housing Accord and Special Housing Areas Act are, I think, a matter for public record. I want to say that I respect the sentiment and the passion of the young people who are protesting. And I say that, yes, mana whenua have their view, although I think there's, it's a very complex conversation with respect to where mana whenua sit on this matter. But just because mana whenua may have a view, that does not in any way constrain the ability of the young people from Seoul from having their view. I don't think that their position is one that should be restrained, frankly. I know that it's a very raw situation that's occurring at Mangere, but they have a right to be there, and I hope that they will continue to reflect their view on this matter. Your Worship, I have been counselled to, I guess, shoulder arms on this, but I have my own established view, and that is that irrespective of whatever view mana whenua have, and irrespective of the views of Seoul, I find the prospect of development at Ahumatau to be another example of profoundly regrettable development. And I think that it is an area that of Auckland that is historic. There are very significant heritage values there, and I would hate to see yet another blade of grass go for the sake of banging up more houses. I think that if you are urban Māori in Mangere, you are probably some of the most marginalised people in Auckland and Tāmaki Makaurau. It will only get worse, I suspect, because I suspect a treaty settlement process runs the risk of decanting communities around Mātatua Marae. And I think that that's going to come up shortly. Your Worship, I'm comfortable to go along with this resolution, but what I would want to think is, look, I would be delighted for part a settlement outcome which involves a land swap. Now, in my ward at Weymouth, we've got the Whakataka Pokai Care and Protection Facility, and currently the government has been seeking to fast track through the court a change in the designation to turn Whakataka Pokai into a youth prison. Now, we don't need a youth prison at Weymouth, but we do need homes. And my view, and I have said as much in my evidence to the court, is that actually what should happen is that the Crown should step back from seeking a designation, change of designation for Whakataka Pokai. Instead of building a youth prison, it should develop that site for homes. And what should happen is that this should be part of a land swap brokered with the developer to allow the developer to develop at Weymouth as opposed to Ahumatau as part of a solution which allows for the land at Ahumatau to be returned to create it into a reserve. I note that this week, just as we've seen what is happening at Ahumatau, the government has announced that it intends to proceed with changes to the Resource Management Act. I have no doubt that what is coming will be an attempt to remove the rural-urban boundary for Auckland, to open it up for more greenfields housing. Now, Ahumatau's in the rub, but actually there are expanding the scale of Auckland to create more and more and more greenfields subdivisions, which are there for not for the purpose of housing the poor. They are there to capitalise those land parcels to make developers very, very wealthy, and the land the housing packages, the land and housing package will be offered at an absolute premium. It will be well beyond the means of urban Māori in South Auckland to afford these house and land packages. The idea that we just sacrifice every blade of grass for subdivisions as part of a capitalised residential land development scheme, I think is a tragedy. So I want to acknowledge the complexity of the debate at Ehumatau, but I think that it is necessary for this council to continue to be part of that conversation. And I have every confidence, Your Worship, that you will be a very willing and progressive contributor to brokering a good outcome.
Thank you very much. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be very quick. Just basically to support the motion and the very eloquent plea from Councillor Collins. Like it or not, the council actually is involved in this, certainly in terms of the perception of the people out at Ehumatau. They came in here in record numbers back in 2015, absolutely packed this place out. Biggest crowd you've ever seen in here. In the chamber, outside, downstairs. It should have been apparent at that point that this matters to the people out there and that it's not going to go away. Just earlier in the year, similar big rally out in Aotea Square. So I think it was a little hopeful that that was just somehow going to dissipate, because what became very apparent to me as an outsider is attitudes were hardening. And what's happened over the last few days has just racked it all up again now. So with all due respect, I don't think it's not an option not to get involved. Someone has to get involved, or this is going to turn ugly, and you can see why it's going to turn ugly. My impression, again, as someone that's not intimately involved in it, is that there hasn't been a lot of communication between the various parties. There has been a bit of a resistance to talk and try and discuss things amongst the different components in this. So echoing the call of other councillors, Mr. Mayor, I think we do have to get involved. I'm not going to be bold enough to suggest a solution. I heard one of the spokesperson today on the radio saying they couldn't think of a solution, but there will be a solution. I think I know an obvious one, but there will be a solution, and we owe it to our city, to our region, to all our people to try and be part of that solution, rather than just drawing the line, flooding the place with police, because we've seen how that rolled out a few decades back. And I think it won't even be as peaceful, as well accepted back then as it is now. You know, the stakes are high in this as far as our community's well-being goes. So please, and I'm sure you will, get out there and try and broker some solution. Everything's not about money in this world.
Councillor Darby, were you wanting another call at this point? No. Okay. Councillor Wayne Walker.
So I'll also be voting in support of this, and like Councillor Lee, I think that this is a really important issue for us to be involved in. It needs to be healed. It's not going to go away. If there does happen to be some housing on this site, it'll be an ongoing scar that will never heal, and an ongoing memory. And that is not something that this council in any way should be part of. Councillor Newman's right, the special housing legislation that went to this was a mistake, and arguably the council should have been stronger in opposing it. But nevertheless, we do need to find a solution here. I'm mindful that across Auckland, in terms of advancing development, housing development, increasingly we have partnerships with the government. We have to have those partnerships because we know that the council is not able to fund the infrastructure otherwise. And the government knows that. And the government is in large part responsible for the immigration into New Zealand that is causing this. So we have ongoing partnerships with the government. If ever there was a necessity for a partnership with the government to resolve an issue, then this is it. And I would prioritise this above almost any other partnership that we have with the government. So we have a partnership around the City Rail Link. We have partnerships around land development up north, and I'm thinking at Silverdale, for example, Milldale. We have any number of partnerships, and these partnerships involve incredibly large sums of money, far larger than this. And we enter into those partnerships in good faith because both the parties, the council and the government, want to solve it. And I think that we can solve this, but in order to solve it, fundamentally, and Councillor Newman and Fiso Collins are right, we need to have a conversation. We need to get talking and not act in haste. So the Mayor and the Council have a lead role here to broker that, and Councillor Casey quite rightly has identified all the parties that need to be involved in that conversation. They're all there. The Crown's there, and quite obviously it was the Crown earlier that was responsible for the confiscations, and the Crown cannot deny that responsibility. So I'll certainly be supporting this, and I think all of the councillors need to support it so that we send a resounding message to the government and the people of New Zealand, and obviously Mana Whenua and iwi.
Thank you very much. Councillor Penny Hulse.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be supporting the recommendation. I think, you can never talk too much, and I think it breaks all our hearts seeing our community standing toe to toe against the police. But I raise one bit of caution, and it's all very well to sit at this table and pass recommendations and send the community away with one picture in their head. I think we need to be a little bit honest and a little bit realistic, and so a little tiny bit of a word around that from me. We also need to respect the process that has been gone through by Te Kawerau Amaki, who have gone through the treaty settlement process over years and years and years and reached an agreement through that process. That was their time to look at the redress issue, and I think I'm not going to make a judgment call on that or say anything about that, but that is left out of the narrative. Secondly, we need to be reminded and also remind our community that we stood with that community and fought in the Environment Court to keep Ihimātao as a park. We fought, we paid ratepayers' money to keep that as a park. We lost. So that gets left out of the narrative by the media. Thirdly, let's also be really clear, and I may offend some of my colleagues now, so I in advance apologise. But I'm very sensitive to a kind of a colonial and vaguely patronising approach which appears to sort of step in and calm the waters when what is happening here and talking to our, Te Pukaki Marae, Te Kawerau Amaki's Marae, Kawerau Marae, talking to Tainui, talking to the people who have been involved in this over decades, to simply say, we'll get the mayor to call a meeting and get people together and it'll all be fine. Let's be very cautious about what that means. And we cannot call Te Kawerau Amaki, Kaumātua and Kuia to a meeting that they might not want to come to. Nor can we call the King's representative, nor can we call, Brownie Rauwhera, Uncle George. We can't call those people and demand that they come and sit at a meeting. So everything we can do to try and settle this, that's good. But my final word is a little bit of respect to allow Mana Whenua to settle some of this in the time and the process that dignifies Mana Whenua. There's been, and I think a true word was spoken, I think acknowledging Councillor Collins, the agendas will out and the truth will out on all sides. So let's try and find a respectful way forward, but can we at least respect Mana Whenua as we do that? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Councillor Hulse just said about exactly what I said. This predates the amalgamation of these councils. This goes back to Manukau City Council days. It goes back to the Environment Court decisions. And this is an unhappy history here. There's no question about that. And I'm very conscious, Mr. Mayor, that you can't demand that all the parties come to the table. and there might be an opportunity here, but there might not. And the realism, the pragmatism must set in. And the question I have, and I'm not even sure if Megan can answer that, is would we be, with the Environment Court decisions and the work that's gone on previously, and I'm not over all of that, but would we be breaking any court decisions? Would we be remitting any agreements that have previously been made or overriding them? And are we on safe legal grounds here? I understand the intent and I agree with the intent, but I am concerned that this is not a simple issue, and there are parties with deep-seated feelings and emotions around that, other than the feelings that are around this table.
Through the chair, I'm happy to. So I guess
Megan, please.
any legal issue coming out of this would be around a solution, not about the fact that you'd be getting around a table talking, notwithstanding the comments that both you and Councillor Holtz have made about whether any parties are willing to do so.
Yep. Thank you. Are there any further comments from councillors? Otherwise, I'll simply reply. And first of all, let me acknowledge all of those that have spoken sincerely and from their hearts about the desire to see this situation resolved other than by confrontation. I think everybody understands that what this country has been through in terms of its history, if this could be resolved by kōrero rather than confrontation, we would all be in a much better space. Equally, I think everybody around this table understands the efforts that we have made to date. This is not coming to us having sat on our hands, having done nothing. I go back, as Councillor Holtz did, to 2012, where Council sought to have Ihumatao designated as public open space, and we were defeated in the Environment Court. And when you're defeated in the Environment Court, legally you have nowhere to go in terms of how that land is to be zoned. It said, the court decreed that the land was to be zoned for future residential or business use. The previous council agreed with the government of the day that a state housing area would be established here, and that was passed by the previous council. When I became mayor, I did visit with the Sol group and listened to their reasoned arguments, understood their passion, understood their genuineness, and we looked for ways in which we could find a solution. More recently, a petition was presented to me and Councillor Holtz in Aotea Square by the Sol petitioners. And we took that on board, and we, in my speech to those that were gathered there, indicated the things that I thought Council could do to help. And at the top of that list was an acknowledgement that the land that we had purchased, 92 hectares, Otuatawa, was the critical area of cultural, heritage and geological significance. And we are proud that that is public land and preserved for the purposes that it should be, to acknowledge the history, 800 years of continuous settlement, to acknowledge the cultural importance of it, and to acknowledge the geographical importance of that area. We also acknowledged that that hadn't been managed as well as it might have been, and we acknowledged the desirability of having a cultural centre on that site. And we are making changes that will see far greater respect and far greater care and investment put into that area. Secondly, there is a block of land that Council does own. It's called the Rennie Block, and it contains the Rennie Homestead. It's 8.9 hectares, and we have agreed around this table that we should work towards ensuring that that not be used for housing, but be used as public open space as part of the wider precinct. At the request of both the Sol group and of 6 councillors who wrote to me and received replies from me almost immediately, I also took up the question of whether we had a role to play in facilitating the coming together of the parties? Could we find the common ground? And we all around this table understood what the sensitivities were. This was not Bastion Point with united Maoridom against an effort to utilise that land as in the way that the Muldoon government wanted to. I protested against that. But this was a situation where there was divided opinion. The protesters, genuine in their views, wanting to keep this land not for any form of housing but as public open space, and 3 of the mana whenua groups who had quite a different opinion. Those groups are Te Akatai o Wahua, Te Kawarau Maki and Waikato Tainui. At the request of SOL and of councillors, I made the approach to the relevant groups. I've got here, and everybody's welcome, I think I've sent out the correspondence already. I've corresponded with Eugenie Sage. I've communicated with Phil Twyford. I was on the phone this morning to Nanaia Mahuta, who was not only Minister of Local Government, but also obviously Waikato Tainui, with very close links to the King movement. And I talked to the mana whenua. And in my reply to Councillor Lee, I quoted the responses that I had from those groups. Yeah, I'm sorry. My electronic records will show that it was sent, but it may have been mislaid somewhere along the way, Councillor, and I'm very happy to give you that. And in fact, I'll circulate it again to all of you that are here. And I knew what Te Waranatawa's view was because he'd been very vocal on it. As you'll recall, he wrote to this council saying, "This is a matter for mana whenua, keep your nose out of it. We don't want council involved." You've all seen that correspondence. But I went back to him, and his view hadn't changed. In fact, it had hardened. And one of the problems we've got with the situation that everybody's views have hardened. Would it be that people would sit down, work together and say, can we find a solution? I talked to Karen Wilson from Te Akatai, and you're all familiar with Karen. She's been involved in a lot of things here. She is the kuia speaking for Te Akatai, and her view was just as hard. No, I won't meet. I don't accept the mandate of this group. The statutory mandate is with Te Akatai. And I haven't talked directly to Waikato Tainui, but they were present with the other 2 mana whenua groups supporting those other 2 groups. And that is, I understand, the view of the Maori King and the Kingitanga. So we have the situation with that division, and not one of us want to trample on the mana of the mana whenua. And equally, we look to the young people that are protesting at Ihumatao, and we say these are genuine young people who believe fervently in what they are doing. So the efforts that I've made, firstly with Minister Sage, then with Minister Twyford, and with the mana whenua, have not to date succeeded. But I'm willing to support the recommendation, Councillor Casey and Councillor Collins, for the arguments that you put forward. You can never try hard enough to avoid confrontation that will leave scars and to try to find common ground. And I'm willing to make that further effort to approach yet again and say, you know, it will need to be over the coming days to say, is there a way around this? We've got 2 blocks that neither of which want to give way, and the government that is saying itself through the Prime Minister, I heard on the media yesterday, saying they want to respect the mana whenua. But if we can play the role of an honest broker, I'm more than happy to do that on your behalf. I just want to add one other thing. I think the SOL group were very happy with what the decision we made about the Reni block and Otuatawa, about the need to upgrade that. What we also decided, councillors, was that we did not have $40 million that would enable us to purchase that land. It's alongside 8.9 hectares that we will already put into the pot as public open space, and the 92 hectares that we have already purchased because of its huge cultural heritage and geological significance. But if we were to use that 40 million, That's almost the whole of the purchase sum that we have for public open space. And we've sat around this table and we've agreed that there are areas of the city, particularly growth areas of the city, which are crying out for more public open space. And we're talking about an area where we already have a very significant holding of public open space. But I think what the resolution focuses on is the right area, and congratulations to the councillors involved. Let's make another effort. Let's see whether this matter, having come to a head in the confrontation, people are ready to think again think laterally about how we might resolve the differences of opinion. And if we can play that role, I'm happy to do that on your behalf, and I support the resolution. At this point, I'm going to put the resolution. Everybody's familiar with it. It has had a couple of changes that have been made with the agreement of the mover and the seconder. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. I declare it carried unanimously. Thank you very much, and I declare the meeting closed.